Prelude 2, Section 1. I've decided to divide the Prelude 2 into two parts, the Middle Ages, Part 1, or Section 1, and the Renaissance, Section 2. We have too many parts this and part that. It's so confusing. Anyway, here we go. In the textbook, and I should have put this on the slide here, but they have a quote, and it says, and it's from the year the individual Isidore of Seville lived between 560 and 636. And it says, nothing exists without music. For the universe is said to have been framed by a kind of harmony of sounds, and heaven itself revolves under the tones of that harmony. So when they use the word harmony, do you think they're talking about, like we use the word harmony with music? Harmony means agreeable, like we would say you and I have a harmonious relationship. And so I don't know if that they're telling us that they had harmony of music. So the Middle Ages is, we use in textbook 450 to 1450. Whether it's 400 to 1450 doesn't make that much difference. But 1450 is the date we're going to use for the end of the Middle Ages. And always when you have an end, you have its beginning also. And so that's beginning of the Renaissance, 1450. So what happens for the reasons for the fall of the Roman Empire? Well, a number of things, right? Invasions by barbarian tribes, economic troubles and over-reliance on slave labor, the rise of the Eastern Empire. Rome was actually two parts in the Mediterranean, from like the middle of Greece west, and then west of Greece. So Greece was the Eastern Empire, and Rome was the Western Empire, but all the Roman Empire until they split. Other reasons of the fall of the Roman Empire: overexpansion and military overspending, government corruption, political instability, the arrival of the Huns and the migration of the barbarian tribes, Christianity and the loss of traditional values. What? Weakening of the Roman legions. Okay, medieval period begins. Migrations of Germanic tribes. Remember, a country like Germany did not become a country until after the American Civil War. Migrations of Germanic tribes disrupted Roman rule from the late 4th century onwards, culminating in the eventual collapse of the empire in the West in 476, replaced by the so-called barbarian kingdoms. In 476, right, Romulus, the last of the Roman empires, was overthrown in the West, because there were still Roman empires in the East until 1452, I believe, was overthrown by the Germanic leader Ottokar. I think that is spelled wrong, who became the first barbarian to rule in Rome, also known as, okay, well, maybe it's one of many different spellings. The order that the Roman Empire had brought to Western Europe for 1,000 years was no more. The resultant cultural fusion of Greco-Roman, Germanic, and Christian traditions formed the cultural foundations of Europe. Again, three things, right? Greco-Roman, Germanic tribes, and Christianity. So why does the textbook start with the Middle Ages? All music textbooks that teach music history basically start in the Middle Ages. So 450 to 1450, log those dates in your brain, right? Middle Ages, 1,000 years. ends in 1450, subtract 1,000, you get 450. It is because this is the time period in which music notation, the actual writing down of music on a piece of paper, was fully developed and allowed the recording of music. Music notation is the first recorded music. We didn't have physical ways of recording the sounds, but this was a way to put it on paper. This is when music history starts, and we're able to, with relative certainty, know how the music was performed and what it sounded like. So with music notation, which was around 900 to 1050 when it was actually fully developed, more or less, there's two parts, right? The sound part and the time part. You have to write it down. Which part do you think was harder to figure out a method of doing it? The sound part or the time part? Well, the sound part was fairly easy, and Guido Arezzo used his hands and basically, you have the 5 lines and the 4 spaces with your hand, and so he somehow associated that with the pitches, the higher and the lower, and came up with rules of that, and that developed into the staff. But then the left and right part, the time part, was much more difficult, and there were several different ways that were being developed until one became the best way, and the others, although they weren't necessarily inferior, because they recorded. Time is really weird, and to notate it is not easy, and there's kind of like not a perfect way of doing it. So before music notation, there has to be a lot of guessing, right? As far as what music sounded like. Not that there was no music, since there has never been a civilization, right? In modern times, we find civilizations that did not have music. And we say modern times, we really mean like from 1600 and after. And because from the Renaissance to the Baroque, that's when we really become modern, and it's a transition. So Baroque is kind of a transition time between early music and modern music, in a big general use of the term. So we have pictures and descriptions and statues, spelled wrong, and mosaics of music and musicians from the existence of humanity. When they started to write things down, they showed you what people, what they did. And they had animals, and many times we have, especially from the Greeks, mosaics that show music activity. So it says, please see the attached photo of a flute, right? I think I already showed you this in another slide. And so here, this confuses me. It says music as commodity and social activity. That's the title of this prelude. And I really don't know exactly what that means. Music as commodity and social activity. So notation has defined the development of Western music. It's the same thing with language. When they started to write things down, this is when things took off as far as knowledge. And one of the things that humanity, why we've always made advance, is because the ideas are shared, and people are very interested in a new idea, and if it's a better way of doing things, it quickly gets adopted. When I say quickly, sometimes it's 20 years, 40 years, like solar energy, and as opposed to petroleum. Anyway, there's a transition that takes place with new ideas. So notation in the West first served the goals of Christian worship. Most examples are from this tradition, most examples of music. Notated secular music survives from later on in the period because nobody wrote it down. And so, like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. And so the Catholic Church, let's say at the beginning of the Middle Ages, which was very young, but it became for at least 100 years it was the state church of the Roman Empire. So it really it established the geographic area where the churches were built and a continuity between all the churches to make an organization, right, from top to bottom, the Pope and down to the priests and the nuns. So this whole organized thing, and of course it didn't start like that, and it grew into that. But nevertheless, just the system of the church itself being there was an important thing that was left from the Roman Empire, because the soldiers and military were gone, but still the church was there, and it provided some continuity. And early on, Pope Gregory, and they call it sometimes Gregorian chant, but he never wrote any music himself. But what he did is I can't tell you, Echo, when was Pope Gregory?
Here's something I found on the web. According to Wikipedia.org, St. Gregory I the Great was Pope from September 3rd, 590 until his death.
From 590, okay, 600 is when Gregory said, okay, all the church, we want to make sure that on Sunday, we all say the same prayers. Bam, right? And then not only that, he says, well, these prayers are sung, so we have to make sure we're singing the same song, which is very difficult to make sure that everybody's singing the same song. And how do you can write the words down and pass that around from one church to the other, but the songs had to be communicated orally, so this was very difficult. So as time passed, the church realized that they had to codify the songs, and this is what really was the need to have music notation, and that's how it was first used, to have the ability to write down a song and say, okay, guys, on Sunday, this is the song we're going to sing. And so that's what happened and with the development of music notation. So again, only a few fragments from ancient antiquity, right? But we've listened to a couple of examples already in the other video. And so the fall of the Roman Empire, second half. So it's really like we had the church and then disorder, and then people of became powerful and became landowners. And so if you were a landowner, then you had power, and then you had fiefs and all that kind of a economic existence where you have landowners and people that live on the land that are indebted to the landowner. Here is a piece of art from, let's say, 1400. So this would be the end of the Middle Ages. And of course, it's like many things, right? You look deeper, you can define it. But so the development of polyphony, and again, here's that Gregorian chant. I should have used it in the other slide, but that's how polyphony means more than one music line, right? And so first you had to have things written down, and then it kind of like grew into an experiment, right? I'm sure after practice and it's like in polyphony. So in the year 380 Common Era is when Christianity was declared the state church of the Roman Empire. Yeah, look what happened. The Rome shrank from being hundreds of thousands of people to only 30,000 people, because who wants to live in a dirty city where it's dangerous and you can't get a job and there's no food and the water is terrible, it'll kill you. So, okay, I think I'll move on. So what happened, right, in the continuation of this transition? We had depopulation, deurbanization, increased barbarian invasion. right? North Africa, part of the Roman Empire, this all became Islam. Feudal system. Right? Roman authority disappeared. Trading networks. The Romans had money, and then suddenly there was no money. And coins, right? Collapse in trade and manufacture for export. It become unsafe to travel to carry goods over any distance, right? If I'm going to, sell my wine that I made in Las Cruces to somebody in San Rosario, and then I can't get it there because people steal it on the way. So when you say, well, forget that, I'm not going to do that because there's no order, there's no law that's respected, and this discourages trade activity. So Islam is, or Muhammad, who lived between 570 632. Look at that, same time as Pope Gregory. And here again, it shows that Spain is occupied by Arabs, part of Turkey. Charlemagne, right? 814. And look over here. This is the map, but it shows the Muslim kingdom of Spain. And we had the Pyrenees Mountains. And most likely, this is what stopped the Muslims from continuing on. And there's the story that they had plans to do that. And Charlemagne's father got an army together by going from village to village, and he would come to your house and hold up a sword to your throat and say, would you like to be in my army? Or stay here and be hungry. So okay, they joined the army anyway. So the story goes that there was just like in the movies, right, a line of men across the top of the mountain, and the Muslim army down at the bottom, and it's like, should we go attack or should we go home? And so they waited like 3 days and decided, okay, we're going to attack. And they attacked, and their leader immediately got killed. And they said, okay, it's a sign from God. Let's get out of here. And so they abandoned the idea. So is that true? I just said it must be true. A reliquary. What is that? I looked it up, right? And it's a container that holds relics of the Emperor Charlemagne in the form of a portrait bust. So in the late Middle Ages, right, we have the merchant class. People are trading again, and I guess if you learn how to protect your goods when you're going from Las Cruces to someplace else, and you hire guards, right? And then you are able to do this and establish a business. I'm sure that's exactly what happened. Merchant class arose. Knights and the Crusades. Uh, anyway, the cult of Mary, concepts of chivalry, right, from the knights, which was an important development of a code of behaving yourself and respecting others, right? This is what chivalry is. Troubadours and trouvères were traveling composers and performers, and this is between 1100 and 1300. So this is definitely Middle Ages activity, and not so much into the Renaissance. The troubadours, and they would travel around, sing, bring news of what's going on, and always were able to draw a crowd and make money. The trade routes of uh, let's see, can I make this bigger by putting it this way? Here we go. Trade and manufacturing, 1000 to 1300. This is the end or near the end of the medieval Middle Ages, right? Look at what they're trading: copper, cork, cotton, currants, fish, flax, furs, glass, grain, hemp, money, horses, lead, paper, olives, raisins, tin, timber, wine, wool. Okay, well, people got rich doing this, right? And of course, the roads were there from the Roman Empire. They didn't go away. Probably got into be disrepair after, 800, 600 years, but uh, the, they were still there. The Tower of Pisa, right? 1173, 1372. They started building it, and then it started to tilt after they got up to the third or fourth floor, and they just said, forget this. And they waited like about 80 years, and they started to build it again. Fibonacci lived in Pisa, and I'm sure he saw this building going on, like a skyscraper, something ever probably tallest building, who knows. But anyway, I'm sure it was. But Fibonacci, if you know about Fibonacci, the mathematician, uh, and just to tell you, because it's important, it's an example of how the Middle Ages turned into the Renaissance, is that the Arabs during this whole Middle Ages time were conquering and assimilating knowledge as they went along. And they developed a lot in mathematics and in medicine that was not taking place in Europe. And they used the abacus, right, with the beads. So Fibonacci wrote a book about how to use the abacus. And then the abacus started to be used in Europe. This was an important tool in commerce to be able to calculate, and we could all agree upon something by using this abacus. So this was a huge progression of knowledge that from Fibonacci, as well his series of numbers called the Fibonacci series, right? You should, and it's a wonderful thing to know about. Notre Dame Cathedral. I think I have some pictures of that right here, right? 1163. Holy Toledo. This is the late Middle Ages, a long time ago. And still in Paris. But unfortunately, if you paid attention in the last 2 years, there was a fire and it burned the roof. And uh, and so the government insisted, well, fortunately, that they were going to rebuild it. And it had such an unusual roof made of these timbers. And engineers said, you can never do that again. So we're going to put up, some fiberglass and sheetrock, and it'll be fine. But somebody discovered that there were a group of people that for like 25 years have been building ceilings the same kind as that in the Notre Dame, the original Notre Dame Cathedral that burned, and they would know which trees to use, how to work them with Middle Ages tools, and make the beams, which were much stronger as a result of the way they did it than modern beams. So they can rebuild it. I don't know if they've decided to do that yet or not. I hope so. But it's going to take a while. It's not going to take as many trees as they thought. And there are special type of wood trees that are grown in a certain area. And then it's question, are there enough trees and these kinds of things? But it's amazing that these people, a group had of engineers, wackos, that had been building roofs like this for quite some time and had the knowledge how to do it with the original tools. Okay, I think I skipped the slide. And the Crusades, I don't have a slide on that, but that's just wacko. Were mounted to recapture the Holy Land. And And this came a lot from Spain because they had been battling the Arabs for hundreds of years, and so it just grew into the idea of going to the Mid East and uh, reconquering it because it was Christian and part of the Roman Empire, and it was Christian, and then it became Arabic. So the idea was to go back and take the land back, and with thousands of people that would be participating in this, going by ship and by land uh, from mainland Europe. Just didn't these people have anything else to do? Can you imagine if you lived along the way and they said they're coming? He said, "Who's coming?" The Crusaders. It's like, wow. And then they come through your town. How long does it take 100,000 to go through your town? Do you think they behave themselves? Wow. So, as a result of this trade and chivalry, right, and respect and more control, uh, reurbanization of Europe, right, military expansion, this allows for that. And I always say that the U.S. should charge corporations that do international business a defense fee because the only reason they're able to do these uh, international trade is because of stability, which because of our huge military budget. Anyway, the increased contact with Islamic civilization, right? They learned again from this knowledge that was growing in the Islamic world. They had preserved and elaborated on the Greeks and where the Europeans had abandoned it. So this is the code of chivalry, right? Which was very important. Courtly love sets rules for proper behavior. The mathematics of Fibonacci, philosophy of Thomas Aquinas. I don't know what that is. Painting changed, poetry. Cathedrals became because the Christian church got so much money, and then when they would have a plague, which the biggest one was in 1350, the Black Death. Sometimes half the people in a town would die, and everybody in a household would die, and their children would all die. And guess who got the property? The Catholic Church. Who made those rules? So they got more and more money as time passed and were able to afford building cathedrals like this. This is in Spain, 1402, 1520. So, and this one, I believe, was the tallest building in the world for quite some time. But look at the Arabic influence on this building, where this is Notre Dame, right? And this is in France. Arches, plenty of arches. And this is in Seville. Look at this in Alhambra, Granada. And tell me this is not Arabic architecture. '95 famines in Germany. 75, right? Wow. Right? Large areas of land were left sparsely inhabited. In some places, fields were left unworked. The prices of wages rose as landlords sought to entice workers to their fields. It's like we got nobody to process the crops. In the Crusades, 1100 to 1450. This is the slide I was looking for. The Black Plague, 1350. Now, this is a very important music development called the Ars Nova. And in the late 14th century, it is with the Ars Nova that Western music truly diverges from the medieval church's ceremonial and ritual view of music back toward being a more humanistic art. Because the church, being what it is, said had these rules, and that music had to be in reverence of God and uplifting and spiritual, and because their whole philosophy was that we're only here on earth to prove ourselves and earn the right to go to heaven. So this involved a lot of weird behavior and a philosophy of dumbing down things, beating yourself with a whip. This is supposed to help you get to heaven. Sitting under a tree for a week without any food or water to prove a point. Just doing weird stuff to gain the right to go to heaven. So the late Middle Ages, there's a questioning of, is this the best way that we should be treating ourselves? And look at the Greeks and Romans, and they were humanistic, right? It's about humans being human and enjoying ourselves, and not because of heaven or some afterlife thing. So it is with the Ars Nova that Western music truly diverges from the medieval church's ceremonial and ritual view. The most representative music compositional technique of the 14th century was isorhythm, awesomely complex and highly intellectualized music. I don't think we'll see it here, but in some slides in another video, we'll see of all the tile work, intricate tile work that would be done with blocks of colors and contrast, and very mathematical, the whole thing. So the Ars Nova had this practice where the isorhythm, right? And so rhythm was isolated from the melody. And one of the things was that if you were, the technique of isorhythm, if you have two melodies, one is 6 measures long and one is 8 measures long, and you sing the song that's 8 measures long, I'm going to sing the song that's 3 measures long. And if you do yours 3 times and I do mine 4 times, we'll end together. And it's like, what? This is chaotic and really hard to do, and amazing that by the use of mathematics, they were able to find music that was entertaining and worked using this mathematical treatment. Nothing that difficult with the composition until the 20th century. We'll hear some of that music. So again, this leading up to the end of the Renaissance in 1450, voyages, expansion of shipping, printing press was invented, more interest in the Greeks and Romans and humanity, right? Saying, well, if what they did it this way, how do we get to this point where we're just thinking about heaven? Okay, I want to look at this slide again. The title, Looking Out and Looking In. So it's really like this expansion, right, of knowledge out. But it's also looking in, and like the Greeks, and analyzing and deciding, should we do it this way? Is there a better way of doing it? So this both ways. Okay. Okay, that's the. I want to show you quickly the 10 things I wrote about the Middle Ages, and there's plenty of sarcasm here. Right? There's 10 things. 1, it started when the Roman Empire disappeared. Way to go, guys. The Middle Ages. Number 2, the church assumed the role of government. Nothing happened. Number 3, People evacuated cities and moved to the countryside, someplace safe with food. 4. Landowners became wealthy and created a men's club. Knights and all the rules. Kings, too. 5. The rest of us had to beat ourselves up to get to heaven. A lot of praying. WTF? 6. Church patrons, and who wasn't, all listened to the clergy sing plain chant in Latin because it was good for us. Yeah, this is fun. We're going to listen to the music, right? The monks invented music notation because they were tired of trying to remember hundreds of songs by memory. Duh. And that is true. They complained about it. It was so much work trying to remember all these songs. The Arabs tried to take over Europe, Spain, and the Europeans tried to take back the Middle East for Christianity with 4 crusades. That's the way it goes. 9. The Middle Ages came to a head when huge cathedrals all over Europe were made by those who wanted to get to heaven. While they were at it, they also invented polyphony. Why not? 10. A clever young printer, Gutenberg, invented the printing press in 1439 and was promptly put out of business by the big guys, of course, and that's true. 11. Conclusion. The Middle Ages were over and the Renaissance began when Europe realized how stupid they had been and copied as much as they thought worthwhile from the Arabs and looked around at what they had and they ran with it. The Renaissance was a result of a lot of good luck. The plague, we'll find out how that was good luck. The Crusades, merchant wealth, the fall of Constantinople, why that triggered things, and the invention of the printing press and why that changed. Reorganization, questioning the church. Of course, that's the way change occurs. By the way, try doing math with Roman numerals. Using 0 through 9 works a lot better. Thank you, Arabs. Better late than never. Right? 0 through 9 is an Arabic system of counting. The Roman numerals, the I, V, geez, holy Toledo. Okay, that's the end of this prelude section 1.